All right. Andre Ward gives Vasyl Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez some advice, which is to take up tune-up fights before they fight each other. Let's give Andre Ward's logic, and I'm going to give mine in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Vasyl Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez is one of the bigger fights in boxing that it was supposed to be made before we wound up having this issue with the virus that pretty much shut everything down. But it's a fight between the IBF 135-pound champion, which is Teofimo Lopez out of the state of New York, but I think by nationality he might be Ecuadorian, and the WBA, the WBO champion, and the WBC franchise champion, whatever that means, Vasyl Lomachenko out of the Ukraine, and a guy that is considered to be a top pound for pound fighter, you know, pretty much universally. A lot of people have him as number one. Some people have him, I don't know too many people in the mainstream media that don't have him at either number one or number two. They switch between him and Canelo, even though I think both Canelo and he need to be dropped, and him need to be dropped for Terrence Crawford. But those are the guys that we're talking about, and they're both fighting on ESPN. One of the commentators for ESPN is Andre S.O.G. Ward, son of God Ward, a future Hall of Famer and a once pound for pound number one guy in boxing. In my opinion, the last, just without a doubt, no question about it, number one pound for pound fighter in boxing, Andre Ward. He gives some advice to Teofimo Lopez and Vasyl Lomachenko and says that he thinks that Teofimo Lopez, he speaks most specifically about Teofimo Lopez taking a tune-up before he fights Vasyl Lomachenko. And this is his logic behind it is this. He says that this is the biggest fight for Teofimo Lopez. It's his biggest step up, right? Going from fighting Richard Comey to Vasyl Lomachenko is his biggest step up, similar to Richard Comey, as Richard Comey was Teofimo Lopez's biggest step up before, to date. And so he's saying this is a really big step up fight. It's also the biggest risk that he's had in his career for losing. It's the one that has the most money on the line. And so he thinks that Teofimo Lopez should try to take a tune-up fight beforehand, and that both he and Vasyl Lomachenko should take tune-up fights and have that tune-up fight be aired side by side. Like Teofimo Lopez could fight, in the second fight, then Vasyl Lomachenko would fight in the last fight, and they both put their belts on the line. And that would, number one, it would do two things. It would allow Teofimo Lopez and Vasyl Lomachenko to make sure that, they don't have any type of rust, that they're all the way, back, that they're in the flow of things before they have that big fight. And also it gives them a chance to fight and keep the fight in the mind of fight fans, because they would both be fighting together on a card before that. So kind of like a mini build up fight to that fight. Now, Teofimo Lopez, I don't think is particularly excited about that idea, because he had criticized Vasyl Lomachenko for Vasyl Lomachenko wanting to take a tune-up before the Teofimo Lopez fight, because he says, hey man, he feels like he's ready, and time's on his side. He wants to go ahead and get the fight out of the way and not give Vasyl Lomachenko a tune-up. And he actually feels like, or implied that the tune-up, Vasyl Lomachenko asking for the tune-up, is evidence of Vasyl Lomachenko trying to get out of their fight or not looking to make that fight at all. Now, my thought process on it is, I agree with Andre Ward on some things, and on Teofimo Lopez on other things. First, the reason why I think I disagree a little bit with Teofimo Lopez about the tune-up being a bad thing for Teofimo Lopez. I think that that's actually a good thing for Teofimo Lopez because time is on Teofimo Lopez's side. Vasyl Lomachenko is not a young fighter. He's not getting younger. He's not an ancient fighter, but he's not a young fighter. And so the longer that it takes the fight to make it to be made, as long as Teofimo Lopez, if Teofimo Lopez gets another good fight there, and it's against in between, and it's against a guy that is a southpaw, that could help prepare him for Vasyl Lomachenko at all. I'm not quite sure who that guy would be, but there are people that might be able to, at the very least, be a southpaw, a fast-handed southpaw that might allow him to prepare for Vasyl Lomachenko, because the fight with Richard Comey's an orthodox fighter. He's a come-forward fighter, but he doesn't fight anything like Vasyl Lomachenko. So, I mean, the pros on the tune-up fight for Teofimo Lopez is that he gets time to prepare, or he could get an opponent that would prepare him specifically for Vasyl Lomachenko, and also just Vasyl Lomachenko's age and wear and tear, man, because he's not been looking. I mean, he's won all of the fights that he's had. This being Vasyl Lomachenko, I'm talking about. He's legitimately won all the fights that he's had at 135 pounds. Nobody is really put him in a situation where it looked like he wasn't going to be able to pull out the fight. But how he looked at 135 pounds is significantly different than how he looked at 130 pounds. He's clearly having more problems with these bigger guys than he was at, the smaller guys at 130. He's going the distance with he's going the distance with two guys. He's going the distance with Jorge Linares. And he went the distance with Luke Campbell. No, he didn't. Not Jorge Linares. He knocked out Jorge Linares. He got knocked down by Jorge Linares. He wound up winning that by a knockout. And, he wound up beating, $1 Million Corrala. But what's the guy's, Pedraza? Jose Pedraza is the guy I'm looking for. But Jose Pedraza, he went the distance with, and I thought he lost a good number of rounds, maybe 3 or 4 rounds that he lost against Jose Pedraza. But he went the distance with him, and he went the distance with Luke Campbell. I think Luke Campbell could have pulled off a couple rounds in that as well. But he wasn't able to stop. He wasn't nearly as dominant in those fights as he was at 135 pounds, at 130 pounds. And I don't think any of the guys that he's fought to date at 135 pounds are really, they're not the talent level of a Teofimo Lopez. They might have more experience, like Jorge Linares. Jorge Linares had more experience. Yeah, but Jose Linares was there because he got knocked out. I think he got knocked out 2 times in lower weight divisions. And after having fought, he got knocked out by Vasyl Lomachenko, and then I do believe he got stopped again after the Lomachenko fight. You can somebody check box rec on that and make sure that I'm not off about that. But I'm pretty sure Jorge Linares got knocked out again after that fight. Same thing for Jose Pedraza and those guys. They're not the level of competition that Vasyl Lomachenko is, and depending on who Vasyl Lomachenko would fight in a tune-up fight at 135 pounds, you might find that he gets an unnecessary amount of wear and tear on him from the next fight, unless it is, of course, he goes and fights somebody like the one tomato can that he fought at 135, Anthony Corrala, who really didn't do anything other than just ball himself up against the ropes and take a bunch of abuse. So, I don't know. Now, as far as fighting I think the biggest hurdle to the fight would be whether or not this fight takes place in front of a crowd. And if it is the case where, Top Rank is going to make fights and they're going to make fights without anybody in the arena, it's either the UFC just did that last night in the card that they put on. So I would expect that, the boxing will follow suit pretty soon to try to get some events in. I don't think that those type of fights the Teofimo Lopez versus Vasyl Lomachenko, more than likely those are not going to be made, in front of with no crowds, because both those guys are looking at getting, too much money for that fight, according to Bob Arum. So you're probably going to wind up getting these tune-up fights. You're probably going to wind up getting these tune-up fights anyway, which might be why, Andre Ward is pushing for the idea to begin with, because he knows that those guys aren't going to fight in front of, they're not going to be up there. That fight is going to cost too much money, and for those guys, or they want to make too much money for them to lose the whole gate on that fight. So you're probably going to wind up with those type of tune-up fights with one another. They're going to wind up having those tune-up fights regardless, just because of the financial situation. But you let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.